And I will make no apologies for being very much in a campaigning mood, hoping in some way to reflect the anger and frustration at how long it has taken to deal with the issue of Winterbourne, which was highlighted by Panorama over 18 months ago. And I'm very pleased to be joined on the platform today by Vivian Cooper, who's Chief Executive and founding member of the Challenging Behaviour Foundation, that's done so much work over the years to advance the cause of those with challenging behaviour and their families. And also to be joined by Karen Flood, who I was just checking just now. She's co-chair of the National Forum, and she's a bit like a boomerang. This is her third time as the co-chair of the National Forum, which shows you her tenacity and determination to do better for people with a learning disability. So they will speak after I've said a few words, which will be a few longer words than I would have said, because, as I say, Rob sadly is not joining us here this afternoon. I'm sure most of you saw the Panorama programme at the end of May 2011. That awful exposure of the appalling abuse of people with a learning disability in Winterbourne View. Abuse that seemed to be gratuitous. It was done for the fun of it. It was institutionalised. It was happening all the time. And the tragic thing about it was that no one was bothered. CQC, Care Quality Commission, were informed about it. They didn't do anything. Adult safeguarding had been informed of concerns and took ages to do anything. And the commissioners themselves, those people who were buying services at Winterbourne View, simply paid the money and walked away. That is the disgrace, actually, of what was going on. People buying care that was very costly and not being at all interested in whether the individuals were getting good quality care or indeed, frankly, whether they were being abused. So the individuals were let down by a system that had failed them. And so how did that happen? And it also, why has it taken so long to bring about any change? As I say, it's over 18 months since that Panorama programme. Of course, there was the court case, but surely more could have been done in the meantime to have got people out of places like Winterbourne View and to have developed alternatives. So for me, although the abuse itself was appalling, it also raises other significant issues. Why do we, in this day and age, lock up so many people with a learning disability? There are 3,400 people with a learning disability in services that are funded by the NHS, many of them in the private sector, but not all in the private sector. Of those, 1,252 are in assessment and treatment units. And the question is, why do we do that to so many people? And equally fundamentally, why, when they get sent there, do they stay there an awful long time? The average stay at Winterbourne View was 19 months, and some people have been there more than 3 years. Makes one wonder how much assessment and how much treatment was going on there. Were they simply places that just left people literally out of sight and out of mind? And if one had any doubts after watching the initial Panorama programme, the second one, which was on October the 29th, confirmed one's fears. Simon is now out of Winterbourne View, living back in the community, which begs the question, why was he there at all? And that is a fundamental issue. But Simone has been moved somewhere else and still having difficulties, still having problems occurring where she now is. Why? And those are the questions we would hope would be solved by getting to the solutions for Winterbourne. I wanted to say a few brief words about the serious case review. I think Margaret Flynn did an excellent report, an excellent expose of what went wrong. But in reading the catalogue of things that had occurred, what struck me was that in many ways, and this might sound very surprising to you, I think the situation was even worse than the situation presented on Panorama, which was a snapshot in glorious Technicolor. There was violence on a regular basis routine violence. There were 40 safeguarding incidents reported, which is an enormous amount. Staggeringly, the police were called 29 times. Now, this was a small private hospital. Why were the police called so often, almost routinely, to deal with situations that, frankly, the staff should have dealt with? There were 78 visits to the Accident and Emergency Department. No one seemed to be at all concerned what was going on at Winterbourne, but that's the number. But the worst figure of all was that routine restraint was used 558 times in under a 2-year period, more than once a day when there's only 24 people living in Winterbourne View. So doesn't that suggest the climate of Winterbourne View was based on fear and violence? What a way, what an environment to have for people with a learning disability. I think the serious case review presents a damning indictment of a complete systems failure. But there's one significant thing missing in the serious case review. And it's in there in the sense it highlights a problem. Castlebeck, the company involved, didn't cooperate with the serious case review. They were unwilling to share records of the patients. They were unwilling to share an investigation that was carried out by PricewaterhouseCoopers. And crucially, they were unwilling to explain how they spent the £3,500 per week, spent on the individuals in Winterbourne View. That, to me, suggests there's more work to be done to find out exactly what was going on with the money that was being spent on those people. And it raises questions in my mind, is the serious case review process itself fit for purpose? And that needs investigating, because otherwise we'll have further instances, we won't get to the truth of what went on. I want to say a few brief words about the person who blew the whistle and what was going on, Terry Bryan, who was a nurse there. I think we need to acknowledge that without him, the abuse could still be going on because Panorama would not have known about it. And he tried very hard to bring about change and have it exposed. But the various agencies involved didn't really want to listen. I'm going to give you this very brief timetable. It's in the serious case review report, and I think this is a staggering indictment. On the 11th of October 2010, he emailed his manager at Winterbourne View saying there was a problem. On the 26th of October, the then acting manager, a fortnight later, decided to inform South Gloucester Adult Safeguarding there were issues. It took Adult Safeguarding a month to respond. Why? It then took an incredible 3 further months before South Gloucestershire convened a meeting along with Adult Safeguarding, Castlebeck and CQC. So a delay of 3 months before a serious meeting was held to see what goes on. What sort of priority did that suggest there was for what was going on in Winterbourne View? So the next point I wanted to make is, well, what goes wrong? Why are people in these A&T units? The fundamental reason is there's a lack of preventative services in the community. So what happens is they get sent to these places as a place of last resort. And so what seems to go on is this. Someone can be living in the family home or in residential care or in supported living. Their behaviour deteriorates. Parents or the care home staff say we need more resources, we need to find out what's going on. Social services are a bit reluctant to provide those extra resources for a whole variety of reasons. And the situation gets worse and worse. And what most people will tell you, although this isn't totally true, but what they will tell you is late on a Friday afternoon, things reach crisis point, and hey presto, the person is sectioned and ends up in an A&T unit, assessment and treatment unit, miles away from where they live. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, what is far worse is they then spent a very, very long time in that assessment and treatment unit. And that's what we have to change. So basically, services fail to respond to the situation of someone as they get worse. And it may be that what they needed was a different environment to live in. It may be they needed more specialist skilled staff, but certainly they didn't need to go to an assessment and treatment unit. And then there's a crucial systems problem. If the person's living in the community, most of the funding will come from social services. If they go into an assessment and treatment unit, the funding is from the NHS. And that provides what's called a perverse incentive, basically for social services to do nothing. And I know that's a pretty serious indictment, but that is in general true. It's not totally true, but is a key problem. So what do we want? And Viv will say a bit more about this in more detail than I will in my brief snapshot. We want to see the closure of all large assessment and treatment units. That's got to be fundamental. Secondly, and this is equally important, we want to see a significant reduction in all NHS-funded inpatient beds. So that 3,500 I mentioned to you of NHS-funded inpatient beds, including the 1,252 assessment and treatment units, we want to see a significant reduction. And we want to see them replaced by services in the local community, intensive support services, more support in the family home, more assessment done where people are living. Because actually assessment carried out in an assessment and treatment unit is not always the best place to carry out an assessment because it's a very false environment. As part of that, there undoubtedly would need to be a strengthening of community learning disability teams. And there will also need to be a lot more work done to get a genuine integrated response between health and social care. I see I'm pressing your buttons on here. I do apologise. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder for your talk. But we also need to prevent omissions in the first place. Because as I say, if someone goes into a unit, often they don't come out. So we need to particularly work hard for children and young people coming through transition. Because we need to stop the demand for those places. Because as long as there is the demand for those places, particularly the private providers will provide those places. So we've got to stop that happening. A few brief words about the Department of Health review. There was an occasion a few weeks ago when we thought the review was going to be published today. Now that would have made a very interesting background to this because we could have told you everything that's in the review. But it's not being published till next week. What I'm clear on is that the review will be broadly fine on the vision it presents, broadly fine about wanting to see the sort of changes that I've mentioned to you. But the difficulty for the review will be on how to deliver, because the National Health Service will have to shift money from institutional provision to community provision. Social services will need to spend more money on community provision, and they haven't got it. So we will need to have better integrated budgets to ensure that these changes take place. So as I say, the challenge is to get a shift of resources from health to social care and genuine integrated budgets. But one of the difficulties facing the Department of Health review has been the conflict with localism, because the Department of Health have not wanted to dictate to local health or social services what they should do. And I was talking to someone in the coffee lounge earlier, and I was struggling for some words to describe what was meant by that. And I hope this makes sense. They have been like rabbits in the headlights of localism. In other words, they've been paralysed with fear of upsetting the localism agenda. And my call to them all the way through, and others, and Viv has been very strong on this, as has Karen, is that the Department of Health needs to show real leadership to make sure that change happens. And they have the opportunity to do so. Because in a document that is not the most exciting of documents, but was published, I think, a week or two ago, under the new NHS, there is a mandate, an instruction from the Secretary of State to the new body called the National Commissioning Board. And it says one of their objectives is to ensure that clinical commissioning groups, they're the health service bodies at a local level that will commission services, work with local authorities to ensure that vulnerable people, particularly those with learning disabilities and autism, receive safe, appropriate, high-quality care. Now, this is important. The presumption should always be that services are local and that people remain in their communities, exactly what we've been saying. And then the next bit, which we've been saying, is we expect to see a substantial reduction in reliance on inpatient care for these groups of people. So in my view, that provides a very powerful lever for change. But the message to you needs to go further. It will also only happen if people can engage locally and challenge their local health service and challenge their local authorities to bring about those change. And I know MENCAP and the Challenging Behaviour Foundation will be producing a local campaign pack to help people do that. So in conclusion, I think what we've all got to do is, although the Department of Health review will not be everything we want to see, we've got to use it as a very powerful lever for change. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stop the scandal of people being incarcerated in centres miles away from their families and bring them back to the communities they live in and have them to be part of those of their communities. It also has the advantage of being better value for money, as the work by the Association for Supported Living shows. So what we've got to do is use the scandal of Winterbourne to help deliver equal rights for people with a learning disability. So I hope that's given you enough of an overview of what is a really fundamental issue. And it now gives me the greatest of pleasure to hand over to Viv to say more about the views of parents, etc., about Winterbourne. And hopefully, Viv, you'll be able to find your way back to your first page of your presentation. Thank you very much indeed.